Guys, we are finally here. I decided to make a 2-foot tall Space Marine a long time ago, it seems. And it all started with a hand test where I created a hand to see if I could understand how all the materials work together. I created a glove for that, which then translated into a full armature in this last video that I made. Then I sewed an undersuit that I had to learn how to sew to do. And in this video, I will be moving on to armor, paint, and all sorts of wear and detail. I'm excited to get this thing over the line so I can show you all what it looks like. So let's have a look. When I made my last video, there was one thing I still hadn't figured out how to solve, and that was shoes. The shoes needed to bend in a very specific spot of the foot so the Marine can stand, crouch, or jump and have his feet look right and settle correctly on the ground. I went through several versions of his shoes before I ended up with one that fit the feet and had a joint that bent just right. I learned that I needed to actually remove the armature's toes and then glue the armature heel to the shoe and let the shoe's toe do most of the bending for us. I also wanted to make the soles out of TP95, which is this rubber material, and so more on that later. First, I had a ton of pieces that I had yet to clean up that I had just printed, so let's start there. I'm pretty excited at this point because I don't see a lot that can stop me from finishing this. Though I'm not worry-free, there are a couple things that I'm still concerned about, like, will the Marine be able to move at all? The armor is super constraining, so maybe when I'm done, he'll just kind of be stiff. Or, how am I going to attach the armor to the soft suit? I keep thinking thread, but that doesn't sit quite right. Tool alert! Believe it or not, a foot sander, yes, exactly the kind that you get online so you can sand your calloused feet, is perfect for sanding PLA material because it rotates slowly and doesn't melt the material. It's pretty cheap and runs about maybe $30 on Amazon, and it works great. One of the things I'm thinking about throughout this finishing process is how I can depict these characters at such a large scale. What are the things that I'm not seeing when they're tiny that I can show now? One of the things I can show is the texture of the armor. It's metal, it's heavy, it's old, which is kind of a fun combination to play with. So once the pieces are sanded and primed, I want to add texture to them before I paint them. A bit ago, I learned a trick where you can give plastic texture of wrought iron if you prime it, and then you let it dry, then you coat it in a spray adhesive, and then you let that dry, and then you prime it again, and so on and so forth. You keep doing that. Take a close look at how this is turning out. Once that's all dry and has enough variety, I'll spray the armor with a shiny metal spray that I can reveal later under the Marine's blue paint. I'll reveal it by applying latex to the areas I sculpted damage into when I was working on the digital armor. Some of this armor I modeled myself, but some of it I found by other artists on the internet. But in all cases, I took all of the models into ZBrush and gave it additional bumps and bits, since, you know, it's pretty large. I'm printing at a pretty large scale. Here's the masking fluid I use. Pretty standard. You can get it at your local art store, or you can get it on Amazon. I'll just apply this liberally to all the areas that I want the silver to show through. Another way that I can show scale is by how I paint the armor. I had already painted some pieces with my airbrush before, but it was all very smooth. Maybe if I paint the armor with sponges, I can get more texture and detail and the rough look that blue-colored armor would have if it was in battles that lasted years. After all, this wouldn't be the first time I've painted with sponges. I've painted minis with sponges before for the same reason. I get a nice color variation. No, not like that. They aren't sponges, they're makeup sponges. They come in these great teardrop shapes that let you get into really tight spaces. Pro tip for all you miniature painters out there, painting minis, especially vehicles with sponges like these, will actually get you a nice variation in all those big plates that are positioned there. Anyway, I decided to paint the marine with sponges so I could get a subtle marbled texture on the surface. It's not super rough, the colors still transition smoothly, but it's not perfect, which is what I want. There are variations to the surface that keeps your eyes guessing a little bit. One of the ways that Space Marines in Games Workshop Warhammer games communicate the rank of the soldier is through the helmet. You can have a white helmet, or a red helmet, or just a plain blue helmet, or a striped one. And so I kind of had analysis paralysis about what to do since, I get to choose one. But I'll just pick the one I think is coolest for now, which is the striped sergeant. Which incidentally is also the one my son thinks is coolest, and though I'm not consistently seeking his approval at all, I chose the same one. I don't need my teenagers to tell me that I think I'm cool in order to believe it. Back off. I grabbed my brush and I started painting gold accents where they belong. I'm starting to get a little excited because I'm starting to see things come together. Now that the white paint on the helmet is dry, I can draw in where I want the red stripe, and mask the space for that. Gluing the golden eagle to the Marine's chest plate was definitely a moment. Then I spent some time demasking to show through to the metal under the blue. Okay, I've skipped showing you some of the demasking of the blue to cut down on the length of the video, but I do want to show you the first couple of pieces that I'm gluing together. The neck ring and the front chest piece. Now that the masking is dry, I'll put on the red. I start with the dark red, and then I'll add a brighter red on top of that to make the painted surface seem a little bit more complex. And let's not forget the little dark details that sit around the helmet, like hoses and metal trims. Let's slow down here so you can see how easy this stuff peels up. Nice. Okay, that's enough. Let's keep moving. But it's about here that I go, that white stripe seems a little too wide. Lame. So I'll have to fix it, but first, let's do the belt. Okay, this step is cool because it's not just 3D printed. I love mixing materials because it helps reinforce, reality. Not everything is made out of plastic in reality, right? I'm making the belt out of leather, and here I'm testing the buckle, which I'm going to be adding magnets to so I can attach it and remove it like a real belt. Here's some more demasking of the plates that cover the abs area. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking about how I'm going to attach these. And I decide on pinning it in place with 3 long pieces of metal that I will be burying deep in both ends of the chest plate and the ab section. I used a small hand drill to poke holes through into the print, and then insert the rod into each like this, until I have 3. Things like this are super important too. Armor that hinges should hinge in a model this big, right? I think it's pretty cool. Okay, let's get all the bits together that are part of the belt. So how did I finally end up deciding to attach armor pieces? Zip ties, guys. They're perfect for it. Why? Well, they're not a permanent solution, so if I want to swap something out, I can. I can just get in there and clip it out. They let me attach the armor pieces to the undersuit and keep it kind of loose so my fingers can get in there. Then I can tighten them with a pair of pliers if I need to. That would have been super difficult to do with thread. And they're pretty cheap, so I can replace them whenever I need. As I'm attaching the pieces, you'll notice me rubbing off the latex masking so we can see some of that metal come through. Here, I'm poking holes through the belt so I can run the zip ties through it and attach the armor that is attached directly to it. And this is where my wife reminds me of our leather hole punch, so instead of using an X-Acto to make holes, I can use that. Let's flip him over and attach the butt plate and the lower back plate. Back plate will get attached just like the app plate did. I'll pin it in place with metal rods. Then I'll attach the butt plate to the belt with zip ties. Let's stand him up and check out that belt fit. Snazzy. Let's throw some leg armor on. I'll hand drill some holes through the armor to run zip ties. Later I'll realize that I can do this with my Dremel, so I'll do that. I also use this really rough, sharp file that is used for leather to create the holes in the soft body fabric so I can run the zip tie through that. Knees, same thing, zip ties. Look how easy that is. To think my original plan involved needle and thread. For the shoe's hinge, I used a simple wooden dowel that I ran through the foot. Later I'll cap off the one end that has the exposed dowel with a 3D printed cap. Then to glue the bottom of the heel to the shoe. Before you know it, the bottom half of the Marine is pretty much put together. Check it out. Pretty exciting. And so on to the top. Before I just go and attach the arms, they needed some bulking up with cotton filler so that they wouldn't look too thin. So just like I stuffed the chest, I'm going to grab my dowel and force some cotton up in there. I kept the chest piece unzip tied pretty much until everything else was added on, so I would have room to operate. After making my test hand, I realized that I hadn't really thought too much about how I was going to attach it to the rest of the armature. So I came up with a little 3D printed bracket that I could use to run the armature through it, bend it, hammer it flat, and then super glue that to the armature wrists. Obviously, it's super important that this be a really strong connection since I'll be moving those wrists around a lot and having them hold stuff, etc. Now I have to score both ends of the wrist bracket and glue them together. Overall, it seems pretty solid and stable though. Marines have a second set of plates that go over their shoes but under their shin armor. Every angle must be protected from a stray bullet, I guess. This will help hide the fact that the Marine doesn't really have a foot unless you consider his shoe a foot. There's no foot in the shoe, per se. You can't argue how good this blue looks against the gold detailing. I have a feeling that's really why Ultramarines became the unofficial representation of the Space Marines for Games Workshop. The color combination really pops, and it's really different from any of the Xenos armies that are out there. It's no secret that a lot of people openly dislike Ultramarines, especially those who've been in the hobby for a bit. There are a lot of other Space Marines to choose from whose backgrounds are more interesting, or unique, or cool. That being said, these colors, boy, they're really nice. Space Marines have a lot of different symbology on their giant shoulder pauldrons, and in most cases, it's unique to the faction that you pick. The right shoulder is usually reserved for your position in the army, like if you're a support, or scout, or like an assault, or if you're like leadership. Once you're in the leadership bracket, the most decorated Marines have the most intricate carvings and reliefs on them. Ostensibly, these pieces of armor are passed down from Marine to Marine and are treasured pieces, having existed for thousands of years, constantly being repaired, repainted, and worn into battle. The 3D shoulder plate on his left side is very much like Titus's from the video game, but it is different. It is not exactly the same, because I didn't want to create Titus. I wanted the freedom to make this guy different and come up with different bits and pieces that I can add to him that don't match the game. And then the left shoulder is saved to honor the army you're in. So in this case it's the Ultramarines, and I wanted to have an Ultramarine symbol that was just painted on, since that's just the most common way that you see it in the game. I wanted to see and explore what that would look like at this scale. Instead of just painting the logo on, I want to mask the negative space out so I can paint it with a sponge and get some good texture. Plus, I'll get better edges this way. While that dries, why don't I go ahead and attach that second hand? Okay, hands on, looking good, and seems like good contact in there. The Ultramarine logo masking is dry, so let me paint that with an off-white first, then a bright white. Then once that's dry, I get to demask the shoulder. Looks good. See how it's textured and uneven? That's what I want. Here's a quick update on the helmet too. For the shoulder pauldrons, I 3D printed a little bracket with a hole in it that I just glued to the inside so I can run the zip tie through it. I attached both shoulders this way, but I attached them through the chest armor, not through the soft undersuit. Here he is, standing all on his own in an I'm ready for anything pose. It's about here that I realized that his arms aren't really going to swing upwards. Those pauldrons are always going to push them back down. So let's toss a skull on the knee pad, because what the hell, Marines are so asymmetrical. These bits will cover the dowels on the feet. And the little skull goes on the helmet, denoting this guy is a sergeant. One of the reasons I chose the helmet, it gets a little skull. Pretty much the whole time I was making this Marine, I was fantasizing about these rubber soles. I thought it would be fun to have a symbol of the Emperor on them, so whenever a Marine stepped, the symbol was left behind. Looks fun now, because they're black, but when I'm done, I'm sure the sole will be covered in mud or something. But at least if you squeeze it, you'll know it's rubbery, and maybe it'll give you a little more grip when he's standing. Who knows? Now it's time to fill in any details, in this case vent holes and other openings that get a little bit of matte black. The feet get a lot of demasking because of all the crushing rocks and Xenos getting their faces kicked in, so they lose a lot of blue paint. Now for the power plant. It could also be called a backpack if you're a heathen, but this thing actually powers the armor and cools it and whatnot, so it's not really a backpack. It's not like they're storing things in there like their lunchbox or anything. I'm going to glue down the post to the back of the chest armor though. This thing already has a grime pass on it, so you can see how the grime will make the rest of the armor look a little bit more dull and saturated. It's fairly heavy, so I'm pretty sure this is what's going to keep my Marine from being able to stand on its own. I can already tell. So what else can I do to reinforce scale? Well, I was thinking that there must be some identifiers on the pieces of armor that lets people know who the pieces belong to, or how they're a set, maybe something like dog tags. So I went to my decals bin that I've collected over the years and found some Roman numerals and some Ultramarine logos that are usually used on vehicles that I can put on the pieces. These of course would not be visible in normal Space Marines because they would be super tiny, but it might be something fun to discover as you're looking at a giant Space Marine in person. Okay, this is my favorite part. This is the bit that really starts making it feel like a real thing and less like something that I made myself. And it's pretty easy. You just mix colors and water it down quite a bit so you get a nice slurry. You can use dark browns, yellows, and reds too, depending on what you're griming up. But in this case, I stayed a bit more conservative since I'll be adding redder browns in a later pass. This also helps make the blue Space Marine feel like a thing that could exist. It's less cartoony looking and something that feels more lived in. All the pieces get slathered in this stuff, and then I take a rag and wipe a lot of it off, making sure that the dark wash stays in the grooves and corners where the things are harder to clean. I'm so amused by this lifeless Space Marine that I get to move around. Just look at him laying there. Okay, now the mud. I want this Marine to look like he's been battling Xenos on a red planet, because it'll look great against his blue armor. So I'll be using a Vallejo pigment powder mixed with water to put on anything that touched the ground or that was nearer to the ground. Hell, later I will add some drier powder all over the place because it'll kind of feel like this guy was walking through sandstorms or fighting and kicking up dirt and stuff. These powders are great because they really have a realistic look when dried, you'll see. I'm piling it on heavy, and just like with grime, I'll rub some of it off. Then I stood him up and I was like, wait up. I totally forgot. This guy needs pouches for his belt. Hello? Where's he going to store his lunch? Okay, so this is great because I love working with other stuff, like I said earlier. So I pulled some thick cardboard out that I had from another project and I cut it in such a way that I could fold it together into a pouch. Then I covered that with a very thin leather that I have that I also used for the handle of the chainsword that I showed in a previous video. and it's kind of looking respectable. I sewed the pouches onto the belt using needle and thread. Then I picked some random tidbits that I had been saving around my workshop to put in the pockets so they could kind of peek out. Maybe give a hint as to what's in there. Medicines, documents, antidotes, who knows. Now his belt is looking snazzy. I think I'll make more stuff in the future to put in it. Grenades, knives, more pouches. That's for later though. Okay, you can't have a finished Space Marine without a purity seal. I'm excited to make these, if not just for the fact that they're big enough for me to have fun putting it together, because you can actually see the details. Lots of options have been made online for costumes and like fridge magnets and stuff, so I borrowed some designs that I thought were cool and maybe combined them and changed them a bit, and printed them out on a paper that I had stained with tea and dried, of course. I sculpted the seal and made it look a little bit like wax in ZBrush, and then I 3D printed it and glued those bad boys on there. Here it is. Guys, it's done. I took it on the road for beauty shots. It has been a long journey to get here, many months. But it's not really over, because over the next couple of months, as I work between projects, I might get to hankering to print a new helmet, or to make him a giant banner, or make him a shield, or new weapons like a sword or hammer. This project lasted seemingly forever, so I'm super excited to move on to other new things, because I have a short span of attention. So I've got some really cool surprises coming. I'm really excited to work on them, so please stay tuned. Share this video, like this video, and subscribe to this video, and we will talk soon. Peace.